Chapter 841. Am I Jiyu Jin? Jiang Hao was shocked at the chef's words. The way the chef spoke sounded as if she had known who he was for a long time. He hadn't used Jiyu Jin's name even once in the West. How could figure this out? I don't understand what you mean, Jiang Hao said. Regardless, he couldn't let her misunderstanding continue. Baizhu sat there quietly. Even an immortal ascension platform cultivator wasn't given this much respect. If it were Hong Yuye, it would make sense. But judging by the chef's words, she meant him. In her eyes, he was a senior. Senior, do you really not remember me? The chef asked. Jiang Hao shook his head. He didn't even know if the chef had the right person. Liu Ying. Senior, do you really not remember me? The chef asked. Perhaps you've mistaken me for someone else, Jiang Hao said. Is that so? Liu Ying seemed somewhat disappointed. After that, Liu Ying said, there has been some chaos in the aura of the western region. I can't see much, but the sea-sky forest is out of control. Whether it stopped or not is meaningless, but I know the specific location. However, even now, I don't know what the source is. I always thought that this chaos would bring about your arrival. I now know that the western region will be fine. What did you see? Jiang Hao was quite surprised. He himself didn't know what the impact would be. Moreover, he had no intention of getting involved with the sea-sky forest. The difference in strength was too great. I haven't seen anything, Liu Ying said. Then, why do you think my arrival will help the West? Jiang Hao asked. He felt that the chef was contradicting herself. What else would it be? Liu Ying said. A person's name casts a shadow on the tree. Your name already represents everything. Countless years ago, you alone suppressed the West. You held up a piece of sky that belonged to you. Even the Clear Sky School and the Mountain Sea Sword sect have to bow to you. Isn't that enough reassurance? Jiang Hao was shocked. When did he become so powerful? He felt that the chef had definitely mistaken him for someone else. But he was curious just who she thought he was. Then, who am I? Ruling all things to their end. Forcing them and their leaders into the sea of nothingness. You heavily injured the fallen immortal clan and sent them into hiding. You even subdued the corpse clan and prevented them from manipulating others. You are the great senior of the Astronomical Academy. You're the towering existence of the West and the most powerful under the heavens. Your name is Jiyu Jin, Liu Ying said seriously. Jiang Hao was stunned. Baizhu was horrified. Jiyu Jin? Was this really because of the ancient and modern book in her hands? She felt like the book had made it happen. She had read the book. It described things that the chef had said in exact detail. She lowered her head and ate her noodles. Her luck seemed to have worsened. Unfortunately, she had met the main character of that book. From the chef's reaction, she understood that she was nothing but ordinary when compared to these two people. The West was really frightening. This place wasn't meant for normal people. In the South, she hadn't faced something like this. It was much safer in the South. Jiang Hao was also surprised. He hadn't told anyone his name was Jiyu Jin, so how had recognized him? The only possibility was the name imprinted on the palm of his hand. Could this name be sensed by others? Could it have such an impact on the West? Jiyu Jin was truly extraordinary. It was no wonder he had ventured to the birthplace of the heavenly fate Misfortune Pearl. He was still alive. Why do you think I am Jiyu Jin? Jiang Hao asked calmly. The chef was so firm in her words that denying it was pointless. Because only you can bring such a huge change in the aura in the West, the chef said seriously. Jiang Hao lowered his head. He suddenly remembered the words on the last page of the ancient and modern book. When we meet again, I am myself and not myself at the same time. The book was still with Baizhu. If he took it back, wouldn't people from the academy question it? Wouldn't they think he was actually Jiyu Jin? Jiang Hao was unsure. How much for the noodles? Jiang Hao didn't say much else and intended to settle the bill. The chef didn't insist and asked for 10 spirit stones. Jiang Hao paid and got up to leave. Senior, said the chef as she stopped him from leaving, perhaps your situation is not ideal right now, and you want to avoid all this. But the aura of the West is like a vortex, and you have a significant impact on it. The matter of the sea-sky forest is also similar. If you intend to deal with it, the two sides are destined to meet. Please be very careful. Jiang Hao nodded. He then turned and walked away with Hong Yuye. After the two left, the chef returned to her previous indifferent self. When Baizhu looked at her, she saw a quiet, unmoved woman. "Senior, what's going on?" Baizhu asked. "You are also in the vortex of the West," Liu Ying said. "Why?" Baizhu found it hard to believe. "I'm just an ordinary young woman. You carry the ancient and modern book with you. Although the book is not the main cause, it has a connection with whatever you are going through." Liu Ying looked at Baizhu. "Did you see something strange lately?" The chef sat down and waited for Baizhu to answer. "Something strange?" Baizhu thought for a moment and shook her head. "I haven't seen anything. I've been cautious even in the south. I avoided danger as much as possible. The most dangerous thing was probably getting close to the heavenly fate misfortune pearl. Anne, I don't think I've offended anyone. Surely, you have seen something. Some existence is secretly watching you but doesn't want you to die. So, when it sensed that you reached the West and sensed that you had the ancient and modern book, it made a wrong judgment. It believes you can withstand an unparalleled aura. That's why your state has become abnormal. Whatever you do, you will have to return. All blessings bestowed come with a price," Liu Ying said patiently. "Senior, how can I break free from this aura? And why am I involved? Is it just because of a book?" Baizhu furrowed her brows. "What was I supposed to see? It's probably because of the person behind you. He may also have a place in the West. That's why you were involved unknowingly," Liu Ying said. "So, he gave me this aura like a gift. Clearly, he's the one who made me like this." Baizhu looked distressed. "Is this how the powerful individuals harassed the weak?" Baizhu could find no rhyme or reason for this. "There's been a lot going on in the West recently, and you might not be without hope. Moreover, with the arrival of Senior Jiyu Jin, your chances of survival are high. As for breaking free from the aura, it's probably impossible unless you can convince the person behind you. But, it seems you don't even know who that person is," Liu Ying said. Chapter 842, Vortex. Baizhu frowned at Liu Ying's words. She still couldn't figure out which unknown powerful fissure she might have offended. Perhaps it was just a glance that she had missed. "So, what should I do to solve this issue?" Baizhu asked. "Somebody has suppressed the fiery aura for you temporarily. I can also help you a bit, but after that, you need to face the trials. Of course, you can also try to find out who's behind this and see if you can convince them otherwise," Liu Ying said. "Senior, in your opinion, what are my chances of surviving the trials?" Baizhu asked. 99% chance of death," said Liu Ying. Baizhu nodded. She couldn't face the trials at all. It wasn't fair. The noodle shop owner extended her hand to check Baizhu's pulse. Baizhu complied. After a while, Liu Ying said, "You've probably been targeted for a long time, but the person seems to have paid more attention only recently. Think about what might have attracted their attention. As for facing the trials, there are ways to increase your chances." "What ways?" Baizhu's eyes lit up. "I can help you, but you need to do something for me," Liu Ying said. "What is it?" Baizhu asked. She understood that she would need to give something in exchange. Since she was here, she was prepared to make sacrifices, especially when her life was at stake. "Do you know anyone from the Heavenly Spirit tribe?" Liu Ying asked. "Yes." Baizhu nodded. "Do you have a way to communicate with them?" "It should be possible," said Qiao Yi. "I need you to enter the Heavenly Spirit tribe and find a book for me," Liu Ying said calmly. "This book contains information about the Saint Bandits. I want to know the location of a person." "How is that possible?" Qiao Yi shook her head. "The present books in the Heavenly Spirit tribe don't have any information on Saint Bandits. There is a book. You just can't find it easily. I can tell you the location, and you can go and get it. If you still can't find the book after that, then this deal can end here," Liu Ying said. "What book is it?" Baizhu asked. "I can't tell you, But it's enough for you to get it without knowing about it. Once you have it, don't open it. Just deliver it to me, Liu Ying said. Baizhu thought for a moment. She felt that infiltrating the heavenly spirit tribe wasn't that risky. So, she agreed. Even if there were dangers, she had to go. However, it was a pity not to be able to read the book on Saint Bandits. It'll tell you how to increase the chance of surviving your trials, Liu Ying said and looked outside. A person is arriving at the vast land of the West. They have a powerful aura and are favored by heaven and earth. Find her. Even if you can't get too close to her, it'll still increase your chances. If you do, the person behind you will stop too. The rest depends on yourself. Baizhu nodded. Then, she asked about the person she must find. The answer was expected. She had to find the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. Baizhu was surprised. I probably won't be able to find her. You know a lot more than you let on. Don't worry. You'll find her. The methods of the Bright Moon sect are powerful, but your condition is also unique. You'll be able to find her, said Liu Ying. Which direction should I go in? Any direction. Go where your luck takes you. As soon as you set foot outside the city, your luck will guide you. Baizhu felt that the blessing she had received was extraordinary. I heard that this city was the former site of the Astronomical Academy. Is it true? Yes. There are many opportunities here. Whatever you find is meant for you, Liu Ying said. Why did the Astronomical Academy suddenly relocate? This time, Baizhu didn't get an answer. It seemed that there might have been a big change that had forced the academy to relocate. Liu Ying finally said, Go. I've told you enough. Baizhu left reluctantly. She had learned quite a bit just by sitting here. She ignored her condition. She needed to find out more about the sea-sky forest. The changes there had already begun. A great catastrophe was coming. Also, the leader of the End of All Things seemed to have been forced into the Sea of Nothingness. The End of All Things, the Fallen Immortal Clan, and the Corpse Clan all had beef with the Astronomical Academy. The waitress watched the two people leave. Boss, do you really not know who is targeting her? What do you think of her? The chef asked. I think she's a good person, said the waitress. She's very complicated, and I don't want to get involved too deeply. Despite her young age, the people she knows, and the things she has to deal with, they're extraordinary. Otherwise, why would she be valued by that person? Unfortunately, she doesn't remember when she had tried to spy on him. Liu Ying walked into the kitchen. The waitress sighed. There were not many people in the restaurant now. Baizhu left with Qiao Yi. She looked up at the sky. She wondered which direction she should head in. She just wanted to find the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. She had no choice but to find her. Princess, who did you offend? Qiao Yi asked anxiously. I don't know, but that chef definitely knows. She just doesn't want to tell me, Baizhu said confidently. Why do you say that? Qiao Yi asked. She knew Jiyu Jin the moment he appeared in the Western Vortex. Not many people can enter the Vortex. She knows about the Sea-Sky Forest, Jiyu Jin, and the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. It only stands to reason that she knows who is doing this to me. She probably has her reasons for not wanting to tell me, Baizhu said. Qiao Yi found that all those travels alone had made Baizhu wise. She wasn't just a naive, young woman. What should we do then? I don't know. First, let's find the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. If everything goes smoothly, I will probably be fine. After all, the chef wants us to do something for her. Qiao Yi thought about it. If Baizhu turned out okay, they would need to visit the Heavenly Spirit Tribe. That place was not safe. Let's talk about that later. There is no deadline, so we can take it slowly. No need to rush. Baizhu now knew she had a chance to survive. She didn't want to fret about the future. Jiang Hao walked out of the noodle shop but didn't intend to leave the ancient city. He wanted to explore it. Perhaps he could find some clue. However, the words of the chef intrigued him. On the way, he asked Hong Yuya Sr., will we really meet someone powerful? If he was correct, this powerful someone was most probably a corpse. The unexpected incident in the sea-sky forest had happened, and now, they needed to wait for the impact. Not we. You, said Hong Yuye. Chapter 843. The clean stone tablet. Jiang Hao froze when she said that. He had no chance of winning while facing the sea-sky forest. It was a weapon used by the end of all things against the West. Dealing with the West was difficult even at the Immortal Ascension platform. The West wasn't like the South. Here, there were many major immortal sects. Even if the Astronomical Academy was weaker now due to the incident with the Earth Extreme Heavenly Pearl, it was still incomparable to the South. The faith of the end of all things in destroying the world was on the corpse. No matter how strong Jiang Hao was, he couldn't possibly face the corpse. He didn't know if he could even escape. Senior, I'm just a small golden core realm cultivator. I won't be any use to you if I face a powerful individual, said Jiang Hao. Hong Yuye glanced at him and chuckled. It seems that you are fated to meet unlucky things. Whether it's the vortex or something else, you can't escape it. Jiang Hao was stunned. It wasn't until then that he remembered the corpse was also something of ill luck. Everything he had encountered was indeed bad luck. The Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl, and the Cursed Tree were all similar. They were a bad omen. But he didn't seek them out. The good things had long been taken away, while bad things found him wherever he went. It did seem he was fated to encounter ill luck everywhere. Jiang Hao sighed inwardly and looked up at the sky. He didn't see any vortex. What are you looking at? Hong Yuye walked on the small path by the street. I want to see what the aura vortex looks like, Jiang Hao said. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't sense anything. With the Heaven Lock technique and the Nameless Manual, he should have been able to sense a lot of things. But he still couldn't sense any vortex affecting the West. Ji Jin not only had given him an identity but also his luck. I am me, and yet, I am not me. Jiang Hao didn't think too much about it. He needed to first understand the situation of the sea-sky forest. Now that he was recognized as Ji Jin in the West, he couldn't use any other identity, especially not that of Smiling San Sheng. If he did, it would only attract trouble. Everyone would then associate Smiling San Sheng with Ji Jin. It would be troublesome in the future. After that, he began to look around. He glanced inside as he passed by an alley. He found a stone tablet deep inside. This stone tablet radiated a vast aura. Senior, do you want to go in and take a look? Jiang Hao asked. Hong Yuye spared a glance and then stepped into the alley. There were some people drinking tea there. No one paid attention to the stone tablet. Jiang Hao walked to the stone tablet and examined it carefully. He found that there were some words on it, Sage's pages. These are pages left by the ancestors of the Astronomical Academy. At that moment, a middle-aged man appeared next to Jiang Hao. He carried a sword, and his outfit was messy. He seemed like a wandering swordsman. He was an ordinary person. This man had a strange aura. It was neither spiritual nor immortal. It was just an ordinary. He had the aura of a martial artist. Senior, who are you? Jiang Hao asked politely. Just a wandering swordsman, the middle-aged man smiled. Do you know a lot about this stone tablet? Jiang Hao asked curiously. He only knew that there were rumors about the sage's pages, but he didn't know much about it. These were left by the Astronomical Academy. It's said to be the immortal fate written by the ancestors of the Academy. The stone tablet is placed here, and those with immortal fate can naturally see more things in it. However, over the years, no one has seen the content of it. Immortal fate from the Astronomical Academy? Jiang Hao was surprised. He hadn't expected it to be placed in a place like this. Yes. The Astronomical Academy is a place of immortals and a place where immortals go on pilgrimage. It is said that this is the former immortal residence, the middle-aged man said with a smile. It seemed that he didn't believe much in these things. Senior, are you a swordsman? Jiang Hao asked. The middle-aged man shook his head. I learned a bit of swordsmanship, but I can't be considered a swordsman. I'm from here and just wanted to see the so-called immortal fate. But after watching for a few days, I found nothing. Perhaps everything is fake, or maybe I don't have an immortal fate. Jiang Hao nodded. Countless people desired immortal fate, but in the end, only a few could embark on this path. A sect recruited many disciples. There were talents gathered from various places. Among these people, the vast majority would remain at the lifeblood refinement realm. After that, they would begin the selection process based on talent, opportunities, and personality. Among the several recruitments, only one person managed to reach the return to Void Realm. It showed how difficult the cultivation path was. After that, Jiang Hao went to the back of the stone tablet. He tried to sense it but found nothing. But he knew that stone tablet was definitely not simple. However, no matter how he looked, there was no clue. It's really something that depends on fate. Jiang Hao couldn't help but sigh. He used his fingers to wipe it spotless. He sighed even more. Each stone tablet here has been wiped clean. It's to show respect to the ancestors of the academy, said the middle-aged man. Hasn't any been left untouched? Jiang Hao asked. There is one. It's said to be a traitor to the academy. A traitor? Jiang Hao was curious. Invite me for a drink, and I'll take you there. The middle-aged swordsman smiled. Of course. Jiang Hao nodded. In fact, he wasn't in a hurry to wipe the stone tablet. He just wanted to explore. Outside the ancient city, a burly man sighed. It took so long. I finally arrived here. Mr. Dao, why did you insist on coming to the ancient city? Zhu Shen was curious. He radiated a restrained divine light. Standing in front of him was the sturdy Mr. Dao, who appeared ragged but looked scholarly. Mr. Dao, there must be a meaning to this, right? Asked Tang Ya. She was assigned the job of guarding him. Mr. Dao smiled. Yes. Since you've followed me here, you probably already immo. Is this your first time here? Do you know much about this place? Zhu Shen asked. I've heard about it. Mr. Dao walked ahead. Could it be? Zhu Shen was deep in thought. Let's go and see, Mr. Dao said. Every time, it's the same thing. It's better not to listen to you. Every day is a riddle, said Tang Ya in annoyance. This time, you didn't have to come. It's you who insisted on following us, Zhu Shen said. I have never visited the West before. Naturally, I would be curious. Besides, the Astronomical Academy used to be the Master's sect. It's only right to come and see it for myself, said Tang Ya. Mr. Dao chuckled. It is said that there is an immortal fate here, perhaps it will be beneficial for us too. Chapter 844, Missed Opportunity. Mr. Dao and his two companions walked inside. On the way, they saw many storefronts. It felt different here compared to overseas. This place was full of ordinary non-cultivators. Everything felt lively. It's hard to imagine that near the Astronomical Academy, there's still a place like this, Mr. Zhu sighed. I feel like the things over there are pretty delicious. Should we try them? Tang Ya asked. Let's go buy some. I'm sure they are good. Mr. Dao smiled. Auntie Chow, should we eat something delicious? I've been eating noodles for months, and there are pancakes over there. Let's go try them, said Bai Zhu. All right. I'll buy it for you, said Qiao Yi. No. Let me go. I'll pick something delicious, Bai Zhu said with a smile. They went to the pancake stall right when Tang Ya did so. In front of the stall, Bai Zhu looked at Tang Ya and said with a smile, Senior, you don't seem to be from around here. Bai Zhu displayed an early-stage golden core realm, while Tang Ya was in the late stage of the primordial spirit realm. Yeah, I'm from out of town. Tang Ya nodded. I feel like you are a bit dangerous. Are you hiding your cultivation realm? Why would you say that? Bai Zhu asked in shock. Because many people like to hide their cultivation realm here and beat around the bush. They often speak in riddles. Do you like riddles? Tang Ya asked. I am very straightforward. I never speak in riddles. Bai Zhu smiled. I don't like that either. They always say I'm too straightforward, and I'll suffer because of it sooner or later, Tang Ya said. Just because you don't like riddles doesn't mean you aren't smart. It has nothing to do with whether you suffer, said Bai Zhu. Tang Ya looked surprised. Exactly. They just don't understand. The two of them talked for a long while. After buying the pancakes, they reluctantly parted ways. Baizhu walked away with Qiao Yi. Do you intend to use her for something, princess? Asked Qiao Yi. No. I just met her and felt a connection with her. So, I was talking with her. She's interesting, said Baizhu. She ate the pancake. Without thinking much, she went straight outside to find the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. Meanwhile, Tang Wei met up with the others. I just met a very powerful person, and we had a great chat. She also hates it when people speak in riddles and don't give a straight answer. I told her I'm like that too. Mr. Zhu nodded. Mr. Dao smiled. It's not easy to find someone you can talk to. Who is she? I don't know. After talking for a while, we each went our separate ways, Tang Wei said. Mr. Dao nodded. He didn't say much and led the people inside. Jiang Hao invited the swordsman for a drink. After that, the swordsman led him deeper into the ancient city. Although they proceeded deeper, the number of people didn't decrease. They increased instead. This is where the sages lived. That's why there are so many people. Everyone wants to come here and pay their respects. The place is special. I heard from some friends that they haven't faced any hardships since they came here. So, they come here every month and burn incense and offerings. Those who stay behind and start a business here are even more respected. Jiang Hao nodded. This place was the former site of the Astronomical Academy. There must be some powerful force at play here that ordinary people couldn't understand. A blessing left by an immortal sect was more than enough to shelter these people. So, that traitor, people hate him. No one bothers to clean that place where his stone tablet is, said the middle-aged swordsman. Jiang Hao could understand, but he was curious about the traitor. What's his name? I don't know. The middle-aged swordsman shook his head. It seems like no one here knows his name. Even if they knew it, they wouldn't speak of him. The people want others to know he was a traitor, but they don't want others to remember him or his name. Why? Jiang Hao was surprised. Because they want him to disappear from history. If his name is passed down, wouldn't it be easy for the traitor to be remembered? The middle-aged swordsman laughed. Anyway, that's what I heard. For a while, Jiang Hao didn't know if it was right to do that or not. He nodded to show that he was paying attention. After a short time, the three of them arrived in an alley close to the statue of the sage. This is it. The middle-aged swordsman sighed. The affinity with immortals is hard to find. What do you think it feels like for an immortal to stand this high? In this lifetime, if I can at least fly, I won't have lived my life in vain. If you do that, do you think your ambitions will also be higher? Jiang Hao asked. He saw that the place was mentioned pretty nicely. He wasn't sure how it would be inside. Yes, said the middle-aged swordsman firmly. I am a greedy person. How about you? My ambitions? Jiang Hao thought for a moment. I just want to live a peaceful life. Hong Yuye glanced at Jiang Hao but didn't say anything. Is your life not peaceful right now? Asked the middle-aged swordsman. Jiang Hao sighed wearily. I can't help it. Everything happens out of my control. In this world, many people had it worse than him. He couldn't even help them. Although he had no worries about food and a roof over his head, he still lived in constant danger. He always had to struggle. Why is it so clean here? The middle-aged man was a bit surprised. He found that this place had been cleaned recently. Maybe someone was here. Jiang Hao frowned. He did feel that there were people inside. But who would suddenly come to clean a place that is dedicated to a traitor? Said the middle-aged man in confusion. Let's go in and find out, Jiang Hao said calmly. They walked inside. The place was indeed clean moments before. Jiang Hao had a bad feeling about it. Someone had seized the chance to clean it, and with that, the reward of bubbles. They saw a young woman standing in front of the stone tomb and wiping away at the stone tablet. She was halfway done. This stone monument radiated a majestic aura. The dirt on it was thick. There would surely be many rewards for cleaning it. Jiang Hao had missed his chance. He felt uneasy. There were two men with the woman. It was Mr. Dao and his companions. Jiang Hao had seen them before. "Are you also here to try your luck?" asked Mr. Dao as he looked at the new people who had arrived. Although this place was the traitor's location, people would always try their luck here if there was something to be gained. They would silently and secretly try to get the gains. If not, they would pretend to scorn the traitor. There's nothing to lose either way. Cleaning it this. You might have to face some challenges from others, said the middle-aged man. Well, you never know unless you try. Do you want to give it a try? Mr. Dao asked politely. Jiang Hao was eager to try, but Hong Yuye moved to his side. Jiang Hao was worried about the white bubbles. If he only obtained white bubbles, others would naturally detect it. His heart sank. In the past, he would have gone for it one way or another. He decided to let it go. Forget it. He sighed. Chapter 845. There is no end to knowledge. The changes were completely unexpected for Jiang Hao. According to the swordsman, no one had cleaned this place in many years. Leaving it dirty for another day wouldn't have been a problem. Unfortunately, someone had taken away his chance the moment he had reached here. However, he knew who the traitor was. Master of the Heavenly Tower. The person who could make all 12 heavenly kings fear and respect him. He was a person who had emerged from the abyssal sea. Looking at the three people, Jiang Hao felt a mix of emotions. Back when he had traveled with Hong Yuye, he had met them briefly. He didn't know if they recognized him. He had used another appearance before. This time, he traveled as himself. With Hong Yuye there, they might not recognize him. If Baizhu couldn't recognize him, he didn't think others could. Mr. Dao didn't react. So, Jiang Hao knew he was looking at an unfamiliar face. Is there really an opportunity here? Jiang Hao asked. He looked at the dirt and wanted to wipe it with a piece of cloth. There is. Tang Yue nodded. I can feel that this stone monument is not simple. The middle-aged swordsman was astonished. Why can't I feel it then? Your eyes aren't as sharp as mine, Tang Yue said while wiping away the dirt. Jiang Hao looked at the stone monument and found that it wasn't inscribed with the sage's pages. However, it had some words at the front. There is no end to knowledge. There is no end to knowledge. This was left behind by that gentleman. It was said that he had great knowledge about everything, more than anyone in the Astronomical Academy. He knew many things, but his cultivation and talent weren't as great as those elders who reside in the backyard of the academy. Mr. Dao sighed. Jiang Hao didn't care about that. He just wanted to add some more words to the phrase. The journey of this man was extremely difficult. With his talent, he wouldn't have reached such a high position, let alone become a renowned scholar in the academy, Jushin said with respect. I wonder when he came here. The middle-aged swordsman wanted to say, Isn't this the traitor everyone hates? But he couldn't say it aloud. He saw that the other two admired and respected this person. So, he didn't want to say something inappropriate. Jiang Hao didn't pay much attention to Mr. Dao and the others. The path of a strong cultivator was never easy. Jiang Hao sighed and took out his pen. Can I add some more words to that phrase? Feel free to do so, friend. Mr. Dao smiled. We are just visitors and don't know the rules here. This place seems like it is never cleaned. It should be fine. Jiang Hao nodded and then stood quietly in front of the stone monument. He didn't care if others saw his writing. His handwriting wasn't really that bad. Others nearby were watching him. They were curious about what this person would leave behind. Hong Yuye felt the same. Jiang Hao didn't care about these people or their opinions. So, he wasn't afraid even if he embarrassed himself by doing this. He just wanted to leave a mark on the stone monument. That was it. He didn't know if what he wrote would be in accordance with whoever had written down the words here. After a while, Jiang Hao put away his pen and ink. Tang Yue looked at the stone monument. There is a path to the mountain of books, but there is no end to learning. Let's go. Jiang Hao turned around and looked at Hong Yuye. She nodded and followed him. Mr. Dao looked at the writing with some emotion. For a moment, he understood how such a person could reach great heights. Apart from them, The person who felt the impact of it most deeply was the middle-aged swordsman. He recognized the words and understood the meaning of the sentence. He got teary-eyed without even knowing. Since childhood, he had used the sword and had wanted to become a swordsman. Unfortunately, whenever he felt hardships, he felt like giving up. Even if he wanted to continue forward, he would slack off in his practice. He had neither talent nor discipline. Having achieved nothing significant, he felt that he had rejected opportunities that were right in front of him. He knew he lacked real talent and knowledge, so he didn't dare accept rewards and opportunities. He hadn't felt bitter before. But now, this simple phrase had opened a dam in him. He felt ashamed. It's too late, really too late. He was over 40. He didn't think he could continue wielding his word. He could only carry it by his side as a decoration. Then, people would occasionally invite him out to drinks just because he had little knowledge about things. Suddenly, someone interrupted his thoughts. He saw the young man looking back at him. Are you calling me? The middle-aged swordsman looked puzzled. Yes. Jiang Hao nodded. Senior, do you still remember your wish? My wish. The middle-aged swordsman was confused. Yes. You said you wanted to fly, said Jiang Hao. The middle-aged swordsman smiled. Indeed, I did say that. Take the sword off your back and place it on the ground, Jiang Hao said. The swordsman didn't understand him but still did it. Stand on it, Jiang Hao said. The middle-aged swordsman was puzzled, but his feet were on the sword at the first moment. Follow me, Jiang Hao said softly and then stepped into the sky. The middle-aged man was stunned. Before he could begin to think, the sword under his feet emitted a sound and then lifted him. He was flying. The wind whistled in his ears, and the streets became smaller. The city was under his feet. He felt a bit frightened but also excited. He was flying in the air. He saw mountains, rivers, and streams beneath him. In the blink of an eye, it was several miles away. That was a great mountain that would take him a long time to cross on foot. Below, Hong Yuye stood in the alley and looked at the stone monument. The stone monument began to change, and the words written by Jiang Hao were gradually engraved on it. It was as though the monument acknowledged it. In just a few breaths, a complete sentence appeared on the stone monument. There is a path to the mountain of books, but there is no end to learning. Then, a burst of light erupted from it, but no one was interested in it. Only a few people saw it. Did you sense it? Mr. Zhu was surprised. Yes. Mr. Dao nodded. Will you ask him about it? I will. After that, the two turned around but found no one behind. What a pity, Zhu Shen sighed. This is actually good. Mr. Dao smiled. Tang Yue looked at the two of them and pretended like she hadn't heard their conversation. She continued to wipe away the dirt on the stone monument. After a long time, the middle-aged swordsman stopped in front of a city. He had asked to stop here. He felt quite sentimental when he watched Jiang Hao disappear in thin air. So, flying in the air feels like this. He was still a little teary-eyed. He looked at the city gate and sighed softly. I traveled for half my life and didn't turn back. I never thought I would come back here. He entered through the city gate, crossed the street, and finally stayed in front of a dojo. He saw an old man in his 60s teaching people martial arts. The old man looked at the swordsman in anger, but he also looked a bit sad. You still show your face here? The middle-aged man walked to the old man and knelt. Father, I want to properly learn the way of the sword. The old man felt as though he had traveled back in time when a child was kneeling right at the same spot and asking him to teach him swordplay. That child was now a middle-aged man of 40. The old man said what he had said 30 years ago, all right. The middle-aged swordsman knelt lower. He knew that there was a chance to be an immortal in this world, but it wasn't a chance for someone as ordinary and mediocre as him. If he could do so in the future, he wanted to make sure he was worthy of an immortal's fate. Father, is it too late for me to learn the sword at the age of 40? It's not too late. It's just right. Chapter 846. The marriage book. Jiang Hao flew back to the ancient city on his sword. The city was vast, and he still wanted to explore other places. Perhaps there were some hidden places that he could find. After meeting with Hong Yuye at the city gate, they continued to wander around the city. It got dark, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. The moon was up high. Jiang Hao walked out of an alley and walked to the river. The place near the river was lit up. There were many people there. Usually, men and women walked hand in hand. Is there a festival here today? Jiang Hao was curious. Hong Yuye glanced at him but said nothing. Jiang Hao didn't care. He hadn't researched anything here properly, so he didn't know much. But it was natural to not know the culture of a new place when visiting for the first time. Unfortunately, he hadn't gained anything today. The stone monument had already been cleaned, and he couldn't do anything about it. His only chance was snatched away by Mr. Dao and the others. It was a pity. This river is glowing. Jiang Hao looked at the river in surprise. There was a faint light under the river. The river was lined with houses and stalls on both sides. There were many people walking around. Hong Yuye glanced down at the river. The water here is very clear. Clear? Jiang Hao looked and nodded. Yes, it's really clear. There was spiritual energy inside the water. This place wasn't as simple as it looked. It was as expected of the Astronomical Academy. As they continued to walk forward, they saw another statue. This time, it wasn't a person but a book. There's a statue ahead. Jiang Hao bought 2 pastries at a stall. He wanted to save them for later. 20 spirit stones, the middle-aged seller said. 20. Jiang Hao was surprised. He thought it would only cost 3 to 5 spirit stones. These pastries are for those united forever, said the middle-aged seller. You can't find it outside. United forever? Jiang Hao was surprised. He didn't understand what it meant. The middle-aged hawker looked surprised. Then, he thought of something and smiled. Take this thing and go to the book in front to offer it. Something good will happen. Ah! Jiang Hao was quite puzzled, especially because the hawker winked at him teasingly. Since you're already here, go and take a look, he said again. Jiang Hao was even more puzzled. After that, he paid the money, accepted the pastries, and walked ahead. Do you want to go and see, senior? He asked. He walked ahead. The more he walked, the more he felt something was wrong. Why were there only couples everywhere? It was only after he walked through this road that he realized. This didn't seem to be a place he should be at. Some men and women were standing in front of the statue of a book. They offered pastries in devotion. But he could finally guess the reason. The pastry was called Undying Heart. He stole a glance at Hong Yuye. She looked indifferent. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. Senior, let's go to another place to take a look. It seems that there's nothing special here. Hong Yuye looked at the book and didn't answer. Jiang Hao led the way, and they left. They stayed in the ancient city. The inn was mostly filled with ordinary people. Unexpectedly, there was a spiritual energy source inside. Ordinary cultivators couldn't perceive it. Otherwise, they would stay here all the time. It could be somewhat helpful for cultivation too. Jiang Hao brewed some tea for Hong Yuye in the inn. The tea had cost him 1,500 spirit stones. The 2 of them also ate the pastries they had bought. What do you think was the purpose of the statue of a book? Hong Yuye suddenly asked. It might be for making some kind of wish, said Jiang Hao. Hong Yuye didn't ask anything else. Jiang Hao said that he wanted to ask around about the sage's pages and left the inn. In the vast room, there was no sound. Even the sound of breathing was barely audible. Suddenly, there was a sound of someone pouring tea into a cup. It was Hong Yuye pouring a cup of tea for herself. She held the teacup in her hands and waited for it to cool a bit. After a short while, she placed the teacup back on the table. She stood up and walked outside. Her steps were slow, and she walked out of the inn. No one noticed her presence, and no one blocked her way. It was as if an invisible force made way for her. She walked aimlessly. Do you think our names will be on the marriage book? Asked a woman. Hong Yuye slowed her pace. There was a man and a woman holding hands. Of course, even the sages will be moved by our sincere prayer, the man said seriously. But my family is against our marriage. What if they don't let me marry you? The woman was worried. The path we walk is together. Those pastries were called undying heart pastries. We offered them to the marriage book with sincerity. Trust me, everything will be okay, said the man. I heard that walking by the river of love means we'll be together for eternity. If that's true, I can truly be happy, said the woman. But, if our family doesn't agree with it, let's run away together. The man nodded. All right. Hong Yuye watched them and continued walking ahead. After a while, she stopped. Her mind was filled with thoughts. Finally, her red figure disappeared. Meanwhile, Jiang Hao returned to the monument of the great sage. He wanted to see if he could still wipe it. However, there was not even a speck of dust. He tried wiping the monument anyway, but nothing happened. As for the words engraved on it, he didn't care about them anymore. He had missed his opportunity. This trip hadn't gone smoothly for him. Was it because of the vortex? He sighed. Suddenly, he felt a curse approach him. He took out the heavenly fate misfortune pearl. The curse withdrew. However, when it sensed who it was, it surged after a while. It's so powerful. Jiang Hao was in awe. He immediately thought of Gui but realized it couldn't be her. It must be Granny Kufa who had attacked him before. She had finally made a move. Jiang Hao didn't know when her main body would arrive. Jiang Hao finally understood why some people feared Granny Kufa so much. The power of her curse was indeed extraordinary. At the Sea Sky Forest, an old man walked out. He looked back and couldn't help but smile. I've finished what I promised. Are you still going to follow me? At that moment, two immortal Ascension Realm experts appeared behind him. It's an honor to be able to do things for you, Senior. An honor. Old Man Corpse Sea smiled. Then, a sea appeared in the Sea Sky Forest, and two dead bodies walked out of it. They rushed at the two people at lightning speed. Boom. The two people were sent flying. They were astonished and tried to cast spells to escape. However, the corpses didn't give them a chance. It grabbed them and pulled them toward the corpse sea. Senior, this must be a misunderstanding, the two shouted. Old Man Corpse Sea shook his head and laughed. Sure. Let this be a misunderstanding. Then, after that, he walked away. Not long after he left, the entire Sea Sky Forest was covered in turbulent waves that swept in all directions. The sea completely covered the mountains. Chapter 847. Someone cuts in line. Jiang Hao once again began to survey the surroundings, but just like before, there was nothing to gain. He also arrived at the location of the statue of a book. He hadn't checked there. He had searched most places with statues, but there were many others that remained untouched. He hadn't heard of any other statues. So, with what he presently had, there wasn't a need to be so desperate. Apart from artifacts that could be wiped, ordinary opportunities were irrelevant to him. Jiang Hao understood what this place was. It was more suitable for fellow cultivators. Fortunately, it wouldn't cause too much commotion. They had already consumed the pastries offered for worship. In the marriage book, there seemed to be some names. When he looked closer, he realized that they were really names but silhouettes of people, like the threads of destiny. Out of curiosity, he decided to appraise it. Marriage book, an artifact of karmic fortune. A treasure condensed by the generations of strong individuals in the Astronomical Academy. It can peer into fate and seek the people bound by fate. Offering pastries that symbolize eternal unity allows the artifact to explore the karma between two individuals. If the connection is strong enough, it can be recorded in the marriage book. The more names recorded, the greater the power of the artifact. It is even capable of interfering with fate. Jiang Hao was quite shocked. This was indeed a magic marriage book. He wondered what might have happened if he and Hong Yuye had offered pastries here. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head. He didn't want to know. It would probably lead to something bad. It was a risk he couldn't afford to take. He preferred peace. Unlike others, what he lacked was time, not opportunities. There was no need for unnecessary risks. At that moment, he felt a curse approaching, likely from Granny Kufa again. It didn't take long for her to find him. However, she probably didn't realize that curses had no effect on him as long as he held the heavenly fate misfortune pearl. After that, he returned to the inn. He brought some pastries to Hong Yuye and made her some tea. "You seem to attract unlucky things," Hong Yuye said. "I should be able to deal with it in the next few days," Jiang Hao said. He needed to handle Granny Kufa's matter. Otherwise, it might lead to trouble with Hong Yuye. However, encountering Bai Zhu and Mr. Dao in the ancient city surprised him, especially Mr. Dao. How did he end up here? The next day, they left the ancient city. In an alley, Jing Dajiang and his two companions arrived at the monument left by the great master of the World Tower. There is no end to learning. Jiang sighed with emotion. Who left this? I sense something strange. Let's ask the owner of the noodle shop, the man with the beard said. Without hesitation, the three quickly arrived at the noodle shop. However, to their surprise, the shop was closed. A note was pasted on the door. When the past and present converge, Jiang Dajiang was surprised. Is it really happening? Jiang Hao took Hong Yuye to other places. He needed to go to the city of cultivation, and the changes in the sea-sky forest had begun. He had to see what was happening there. Once things were confirmed, the chaos would likely begin. Then, he would go to the Gentian cliff to check the status of the ancient pages and thus be able to leave. However, there was a possibility that the matter of the corpse would affect the ancient pages. It depended on whether the corpse was resurrected first or waiting to be awakened. If the corpse also sought the ancient pages, he needed to be one step ahead. If he got them first and returned to the south, there would be no problem. The location of the Gentian cliff was only known to Shongan. So, he had the advantage. However, Senior Dan Yuan's people would surely go there too, and he wondered what their cultivation realms would be. 3 days later, in a towering new city, Jiang Hao planned to find a place to stay as soon as he entered. Then, he would go to the place where they sold pills. However, since Hong Yuye wanted to come with him too, he had no choice but to bring her along. He still had a lot of pills to sell, so he planned to ask about the situation in the sea-sky forest when selling them. He just wasn't sure if the news had reached there. He could sell them all but decided to sell only a portion of it. Then, he would buy tea leaves and let Hong Yuye take a look. He found that there was a queue here. Why was this happening? He asked the person in front of him. There's a big sale of pills here. It's said that people from the heavenly fragrant pill mountain urgently need spirit stones, so many people are here. Jiang Hao was surprised. Wouldn't this disrupt the market? What about other pill sellers? After thinking for a moment, he decided to go to another place. The sale here would surely hurt his chances of earning a bit more. When he asked around, he found out that the most well-informed place in the city was Heavenly Fragrance Pill Mountain. He had no choice but to come back and patiently wait in line. In front of him was a man dressed in a black robe. He was surrounded by various auras. Presumably, he was someone from the dark path. Only the demonic sect had individuals who walked such dangerous paths. Many in the demonic sect also practiced clear techniques. Only those unable to advance resorted to unconventional methods. At that moment, someone else cut in line in front of the black-robed person. "What are you doing?" the black-robed man asked. "Waiting in line." The one who had jumped in line was a woman. "I was waiting in line." "When did you get here? Why did you cut in front of me?" the black-robed man asked coldly. "Cut in line? What are you talking about?" The woman sneered. "I was waiting in line on the side and noticed this area was empty. So, I shifted. How can that be considered cutting in line?" The black-robed man stared at the woman for a long time. "Get lost. Who do you think you are? Do you think people from the Divine Rotation sect are easy to harass?" The elegant woman glared at the black-robed man. "I said I was waiting here, didn't I?" Clang. A sword was unsheathed. Then, it slashed toward the woman. The one who attacked was the black-robed man. The woman also radiated a glow. It was a defensive artifact. The two forces collided. In an instant, the defensive artifact shattered. The sword pointed at her. She looked terrified. The sword light flashed and slashed at her throat. The black-robed man picked up the storage treasure, burned the body, and continued waiting in line. Jiang Hao felt shocked. Could such intense conflicts occur in the city? In the cultivation world, staying safe was impossible if one wasn't strong or didn't try to keep a low profile. It was best not to provoke others. One never knew how strong the other person was and whether one would end up dead. After that, people nearby whispered to each other. "This guy is done for. He killed the wife of that lunatic. Someone will come looking for him soon. We should leave now. There's still time." The whispers weren't quiet, and Jiang Hao was sure the black-robed man could hear them, but he remained indifferent. The man seemed confident. Jiang Hao didn't pay much attention. He waited quietly. After a long time, it was finally his turn. He looked at Hong Yuye, and he didn't look impatient. "Let's go. We've waited long enough," Hong Yuye said calmly. Chapter 848. Another opportunity. After Jiang Hao entered, a woman at the counter immediately asked him what he needed. "Do you buy pills?" Jiang Hao asked. She hesitated. "During special times. Our prices may be lower." "No problem," Jiang Hao said. "What are you planning to sell?" asked the woman. She was young and only in the Golden Core realm. As for her actual age, he was unsure. Hong Yuye also appeared young, but based on her cultivation realm, it was apparent that she had been cultivating for a long, long time. This. Jiang Hao took out a Soul Ascension realm pill. It was a common type of pill. It wasn't that expensive. But a Golden Core realm cultivator would feel surprised. The woman was quite curious. How did someone only at the Golden Core realm possess such a pill? Did he steal it from somewhere? If he had found it somewhere, he wouldn't be trying to sell it here. The woman hesitated. "Please follow me to the 3rd floor." On the 3rd floor, Jiang Hao noticed another woman who was attending to the people waiting there. "Are they here to sell as well?" he asked curiously. "Most likely," whispered the woman leading them. "The guest over there has a primordial spirit realm. Friend, please be careful with your words." Jiang Hao nodded. Then, he waited quietly. He observed the primordial spirit realm cultivator. With a robust aura and a bright primordial spirit, the person was probably beyond the primordial spirit realm. She was probably at the return to void realm. He couldn't understand why someone like that would be waiting here. Most inside were in the Soul Ascension realm, but no one queuing up was in the Soul Ascension realm. Perhaps they didn't have to line up for anything here. But this person had concealed their abilities well. If he didn't have the knowledge from the Nameless manual, he might not have been able to see through it. The other person glanced at him, then continued waiting quietly. The person appeared middle-aged. They were perhaps at the early stage of the primordial spirit realm. It seemed like he lacked confidence. It seemed that was why the woman at the counter sounded so confident. Jiang Hao sighed. There were indeed many cultivators who hid their true cultivation realms. After some time, the door opened. A middle-aged man left with another staff member. The man looked disappointed by the transaction. "Senior, please don't mind. We all work for profit," said the woman reassuringly. "It's your turn, Senior," said another staff member to the primordial spirit realm cultivator. "All right. Thank you," the middle-aged man said politely. The woman beside him smiled. "Senior, please." It didn't take long for the door to open again. "Senior, who asked you both to come in," said another staff member. "You can now go," said the woman who had been escorting Jiang Hao and Hong Yuye. With a nod, Jiang Hao led Hong Yuye into the room. Inside, they saw a large table. Seated at the head of the table was an old man. His aura was restrained, but there were occasional fluctuations in it. His cultivation was at the peak of the Soul Ascension realm. He seemed very strong. A mere glance from him would be enough to kill a Golden Core realm cultivator. "Greetings, Senior," said Jiang Hao politely. On the left side of Senior who sat the middle-aged man from earlier. So, Jiang Hao and Hong Yuye took their seats on the right. After they sat down, Senior who said, "You all are here to sell treasures. You can bring them out one by one, and I'll set a price." As you can see, we have many customers, Anna it's a critical time, so our prices nugged to SNGNT1 why lower than you expect. I hope you understand. If not, you're free to leave. Although he spoke politely enough, it was clear that he didn't want any arguments. Jiang Hao didn't mind. It seemed others felt the same. Then, let me go first, said the middle-aged primordial spirit realm cultivator reluctantly and took out a rusty iron sword. I want to sell this treasure. The sword wasn't long. It was only the length of a forearm. Despite some spiritual fluctuations, its rust-covered appearance made it hard to discern its usefulness. I found this in a well. Don't be fooled by its appearance. It can withstand immense spiritual energy and is quite sharp. It may not be an exceptional treasure, but the material is undoubtedly good, said the middle-aged primordial spirit realm cultivator. It's an ordinary treasure forged from true elemental stones. However, it's not bad. We can purchase it for 8,000 spirit stones, Senior Who said. 8,000 was a small sum. Only 8,000? The middle-aged man seemed disappointed. Jiang Hao looked at the treasure and felt a different aura emanating from it. It gave off a vast and profound energy. It somewhat resembled the endless sword he had encountered in the past. The aura was as vast as the sky. Can I take a look? Jiang Hao asked. The middle-aged man looked surprised. Senior Who looked displeased. The two staff members were also shocked. The middle-aged man agreed. When Jiang Hao touched the sword, he could feel the aura. This was definitely not an ordinary item. An opportunity had shown itself to him. He had missed the stone monument, but he had gained this extraordinary rusty sword. I'll take it. Jiang Hao looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and said, I may not be able to offer much. I can only offer you 70,000 for it. If this was truly related to the endless sword, 70,000 would be a steal. He didn't expect to find such a sword here. Of course, he didn't offer a low price for it. There was no need for that. If he could gain something for it, 70,000 would be worth it. Since it was worth it, there was no need to make things difficult for the seller. Everyone had their own path, and there was no need for unnecessary conflicts. But if the person wasn't willing to sell, Jiang Hao felt that the person would most definitely be willing. As soon as this price was mentioned, the people around were astonished, especially the primordial spirit realm cultivator. Why 70,000? He asked. I cannot afford beyond that, said Jiang Hao. Jiu Jin's identity made him feel calm. I can give you a discount. I can make it 50,000, said the middle-aged man. All right. Jiang Hao nodded. The two completed the transaction. The onlookers, especially Senior Who, were stunned. His face turned dark. However, the primordial spirit realm cultivator ignored the others, and Jiang Hao did the same. I still have some treasures here. See if you need anything else, friend, said the man as he took out other rusty treasures. Jiang Hao couldn't help but marvel when he looked at the items. Did this man plunder someone's tomb? After a careful look, he chose 3 treasures. This time, the 3 items cost a total of 50,000 spirit stones. He had spent 100,000 on treasures. He also took out some pills. Since the highest cultivation was only at the soul ascension realm, he selected some unique and healing spirit herbs. The man offered him 40,000 spirit stones for them. After receiving 40,000 spirit stones, Jiang Hao bought 2 more treasures and spent another 30,000. Finally, the two looked at Senior Who. Senior, please estimate the price of the remaining items. At that moment, the gloomy Senior Who felt like he was being played. He looked at the two people icily. My shop doesn't want to do business with you two. Please leave. The primordial spirit realm cultivator frowned. We waited in line so long to see you, Senior. Are you just going to kick us out just like that? Senior Who sneered. You're just a primordial spirit realm cultivator. As soon as he said that, his aura spread. However, a giant aura like a hand pressed down and shattered his energy. The force of return to void realm pressed Senior Who. He was trembling in fear. Chapter 849, recalling how good she had it in the south, the return to void aura appeared. Except for Jiang Hao and Hong Yuye, everyone else was terrified. That kind of power made them feel like a lost boat in a storm. At any moment, they could be swallowed by the deep sea and destroyed. Senior Hu stood up. He composed himself and glared at the two staff members. Why haven't you served tea to the seniors yet? The two staff members were scared. They hurriedly went to pour the tea. Jiang Hao realized that there wasn't any tea in sight. However, the two staff members hurried along. He found that strange. Everyone was lined up, but these two women had accompanied them. Jiang Hao wondered why. Perhaps it was intentional. After a while, several cups of good tea were brought up to where they were seated. Jiang Hao smelled it. Is this red azure tea? You're quite knowledgeable about tea, said the primordial spirit realm cultivator. Jiang Hao smiled. I bought a lot of tea in a nearby store, so I know a bit about them. He did seem to know a lot about tea. It wasn't especially the taste he knew about but the price of different types of tea. What kind of tea do you buy? Senior Hu asked with a smile. After some thought, Jiang Hao said, mostly September-spring. Lately, he had been buying a lot of September-spring. He bought red azure less frequently than before. He had spent a lot of spirit stones on them. Senior Hu initially thought it was just average tea but didn't expect to hear about September-spring. His face stiffened. He felt that this golden core realm cultivator might be deceiving people. However, when he thought about how Jiang Hao had just spent 100,000 spirit stones on simple treasures, he was convinced it was the truth. Moreover, he didn't dare speak because he feared the return to Void Realm aura might appear again. For a moment, a bold idea popped into his mind. Today, he had offended two seniors who liked to play tricks. He lowered his head and carefully tallied the items for the two seniors. He offered 80,000 for one batch and 60,000 for another. Jiang Hao's batch was the latter. Then, he felt the gaze of Hong Yuye on him. Jiang Hao asked if he had any September-spring for sale. Senior Hu said there was none but could arrange a shipment, which would arrive shortly. Jiang Hao returned 60,000 spirit stones to Senior Hu to book 3 packs of September-spring. He now had only 13,666 spirit stones. He sold most of the remaining items and gained another 10,000. For a moment, he didn't know if he had gained or lost. I actually have a question for you, seniors, said Jiang Hao. Have you heard about the situation in the Sea-Sky Forest? Sea-Sky Forest? Senior Hu said. You mean the Corpse Sea? The water of the Corpse Sea has covered that area and is spreading rapidly, said the middle-aged primordial spirit realm man. Various sects have already gone over, and the people from the Astronomical Academy took action too. However, it's challenging to control the situation. It hasn't been resolved yet. We heard that the end of all things is responsible. We expect something terrible to happen. But, besides some kerfuffle, nothing major has happened yet, said Senior Hu. Jiang Hao was puzzled. Is that all? Where are the awakened corpses? He wondered if the end of all things had failed. The news about the Corpse Sea spreading wasn't much news at all. What he wanted to know was where the corpses under the Corpse Sea had gone, and whether they had awakened yet. Is there more? He asked. It said that some sects were covered by the Corpse Sea and found it difficult to escape. Now that the Corpse Sea is sweeping in all directions, it might bring unimaginable changes to the West. Moreover, various sects still don't know how the Corpse Sea came out of the Corpse Realm, Senior Hu said. The Corpse Realm was quite famous in the West, and many people knew about it. However, Jiang Hao found this news surprising. With so much effort put into the plan by the end of all things, it should have caused a huge commotion. But there was nothing much happening. He wondered if they were biding their time. If so, when would it happen? He couldn't come up with an answer. Finally, he said, have you heard of the North Valley Mountains? North Valley Mountains? It should be in the southern region of the West, under the jurisdiction of the Five Grains Prefecture. Senior Hu said. Is it far from the Sea-Sky Forest? Jiang Hao asked. Quite far, Senior Hu said. Jiang Hao was relieved. He knew that the Jusin Cliff was located somewhere in the North Valley Mountains. There was a city there, and outside the city was a village. On the mountainside of the village was the Jusin cliff. He had a general idea but didn't know the exact location. He would have to ask around. Fortunately, the sea-sky forest was quite far away, so they shouldn't encounter any problems over there. The sage's pages also had no additional information. He didn't know if there were other pages he could find. With nothing else to do, Jiang Hao didn't linger there any longer. He was about to get up and leave. "Friend," said the middle-aged primordial spirit realm cultivator, "I have some information about the sage's pages. Would you like to hear it?" Sage's pages? Jiang Hao was surprised. He asked if he had to pay anything in exchange for the information. The man offered the information in exchange for 1,000 spirit stones. Hong Yuye was present, so he had no choice but to agree. If it was genuinely useful, 1,000 spirit stones would be worth it. If not, then he would have lost 1,000 spirit stones for nothing. In the end, the other party gave him a piece of jade slip, and he left. Jiang Hao remained silent for some time. He then got up and left too. Senior Hu and the others breathed a sigh of relief. Outside, Jiang Hao saw people fighting. They probably had some dispute about lining up. He didn't pay attention to them. Such incidents were common in the cultivation world. It was better to leave quickly. At the inn, Jiang Hao handed the jade slip to Hong Yuye. "Senior, this records a place called the Thousand Rivers Spring. It said that there was an eruption there, and an item emerged. It might be related to the ancient pages. However, nobody knows the details so far. The item might still be near the spring. It's a few days' journey from here. Are you going there?" Hong Yuye didn't look at the jade slip. "Yes. I plan to check it out." Jiang Hao nodded. He needed to stall for time, and the changes in the sea-sky forest worried him. The eruption might not have happened yet. Once it erupted, who knew how terrifying it would be? The curse was also growing. Granny Kufa would come for him again. That needed to be addressed too. In the sky, two people flew on their swords. "Princess, where are we going?" Qiao Yi asked. They had been flying for a long time without stopping. "I don't know. I'll know when we get closer to where we should be," said Baizhu with a smile. "Can you really find the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment like this?" "I don't know, but the chef of the noodle shop said it's possible, so it should be." Baizhu looked naive as though she was a young woman who knew nothing of the world. What else could she do? Everyone and everything made her feel helpless. Not long after leaving, she recalled how good she had it in the south. The south was not that great. It had the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl, the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, and the 9 Nether. But still, it was nothing special. It was at least not as formidable as the West. Chapter 850. A celestial being descends to the mortal world. In the ancient city, Mr. Dao was sitting in a tea pavilion, enjoying his tea. Tang Ya was pouring tea. Zhu Shen entered. "Mr. Dao, I found some information. There's a disturbance in the sea-sky forest, and it seems that the corpse sea from the corpse realm is overflowing. However, we have very little information about the corpse realm, so we can't make a judgment on this matter. So far, the corpse sea has started to spread, like endless seawater sweeping in all directions. The mountains can't stop it, and even the strong can't halt its advance. If this continues, countless people in the West will die under the corpse sea. The people from the Astronomical Academy should soon be able to control the corpse sea," Mr. Dao said while sipping tea. "Is there any news about the end of all things?" "There's some. It seems their people are divided into 2 groups. One is in the sea-sky forest, and the other is active everywhere, presumably for the sake of the sage's pages," Zhu Shen said. Mr. Dao thought for a moment. "Have we found the person we're looking for?" "Not yet, but there is some information." Zhu Shen hesitated for a moment. "Can we really find that place?" "This is the information I obtained from Wu Yang. Not only are we looking, but also the Great Thousand God sect is on it," Mr. Dao said calmly. "After all that talk, you haven't told us anything," Tang Ya said helplessly. "Just call it the Dragon's Nest. Why play it like a riddle? Sometimes our conversations may be overheard, And it's better not to mention things if it's not necessary, Jushin said. Will the dragon's nest really be in the west? Tang Yue didn't believe it. It probably won't be. It's possible there's just related information, Mr. Dao said. Besides the dragon's nest, do we want to go and check the sage's pages? Jushin asked. Mr. Dao shook his head. Let it go. This is a matter for the great sage. This is ultimately the West, not overseas. We need to be extremely cautious here and not miss out on relevant information. Also, the situation in the sea-sky forest. After saying that, Mr. Dao paused for a moment. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow, we'll investigate the situation. Stay in the ancient city for a short time. It's much safer here than outside. Tang Yue and Jushin nodded. On the other side, Baizhu, who was still flying, suddenly stopped. Then, she looked at a small mountain village below. Auntie Chow, let's stay in that mountain village for a night and give them some things. I feel bad seeing them so poor. Just some kindness. Chow Yi had no objection. After that, the two landed. There was a large mountain here. There was an extremely powerful force but was on the verge of losing control. If they were careless, it would explode and destroy lives within several hundred miles. Baizhu was a bit surprised. Is it my luck or just bad luck? To her, this place couldn't do anything to her, but at a glance, it was not a good thing. However, the more she observed, the stranger she felt. The out-of-control force seemed to be regulated by something. Clearly, it was about to erupt, but it hadn't just yet. This made Baizhu curious about what was regulating such a massive force. Princess, you sensed it? Qiao Yi asked. Of course, I am the first genius of the royal family. I can sense things that you can't sense, Baizhu said proudly. Then, should we leave as soon as possible? Qiao Yi didn't sense anything much, but she knew that this place was extremely dangerous. It was not suitable to stay here for a long time. No. Let's go and see this village. Baizhu walked toward it. It was getting dark. When they arrived at the entrance of the village, people looked wary. They didn't know where these outsiders came from. Where is your village chief? Baizhu asked a woman beside her. After finding out the location, Baizhu headed there. After a while, the elderly village chief introduced Baizhu to the people in the village as a distinguished guest from the city. Each family received a pound of meat. Everyone was delighted. Baizhu also gave them some grains. As long as it could be solved with money, there was nothing she couldn't do. After that, she asked the village chief if anything had happened in the village recently. Yes. A few years ago, someone in the village offended the fire god on the mountain. That day, the fire god sent down divine punishment. The flames soared, and the mountain was on fire. It was like a sea of fire everywhere, the village chief said with some trepidation. If it weren't for the appearance of the mountain's daughter that day, we would have died long ago. From that time, the mountain princess appeases the anger of the fire god every day. Every day, our hunters take her into the mountain during the day and wait for her to return at night. Yes. If it weren't for the mountain princess, I would have died back then, said a woman gratefully. Baizhu was somewhat surprised. The mountain princess? Who was that person? At sunset, many people looked in the direction of the mountain. Baizhu and Qiao Yi were also eagerly looking forward to it. They wanted to see who this mountain princess really was. Soon, a light descended. A group of people walked out of the mountain. Baizhu and the others couldn't see the others clearly but saw a young woman walk out of the mountain. Her form glowed with a faint white light. She was covered in dirt, yet it didn't diminish her radiance. It was as if she were a celestial being in the sky, yet her feet were on the ground. A celestial being descends to the mortal world, Qiao Yi said in awe. Soon, she found out that the other party was actually in the primordial spirit realm. Baizhu saw it clearly. The moonlight did not come from the moon but from a pure white bird beside the girl. This is the moon wheel. This was the person with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. Auntie Chow, I feel like I've never been so lucky in my life, Baizhu said. In the evening, Jiang Hao was sitting cross-legged on the bed. He already knew about tonight's gathering. He needed to review the information from the last gathering, and when everything was ready, he would start wiping the magical treasures. He hoped to gain something. Tomorrow, he would go to the Thousand River Spring to see if there was anything related to the sage's pages. It seemed that the Thousand River Spring was closer to Mountain River Valley. If it was convenient, he could take a look. If Guan Zhongfei was there, he could also retrieve the mountain sea seal. But he didn't know how things were going on Zhong's side. Reviewing the information from the last gathering, Jiang Hao found that there was nothing particularly noteworthy. Most tasks were from Gui. At that time, Jiang Hao took out a rusty iron sword. Without hesitation, he appraised it. Mountain River Sword Embryo, the sword embryo that the Mountain Sea Sword sect condensed when they condensed the Seven Extremes sword. Due to the influence of the mountains and rivers, they had no choice but to leave the sword embryo in the mountains and rivers. After countless years, the sword embryo took shape, but under the changes of the mountains and rivers, it completely became an ownerless item. Its aura was restrained and returned to ordinary. You can use your own sword's intent to refine the sword embryo. Use your cultivation to forge a sword, and use the sword to condense your cultivation. Looking at the feedback, Jiang Hao found it somewhat unbelievable. He picked up a sword embryo, and it was coagulated by the Mountain Sea Sword sect. How many spirit stones could it be sold for? Buying it for 50,000 spirit stones was indeed a big profit. However, he was in no hurry to sell it. Maybe there were other uses for it. For now, he wanted to see if he could gain bubbles by wiping it. Chapter 851. Who else is in the West? He used the same piece of cloth as before. He often used it to wipe the heavenly blade. He found that the rusty iron slag was not easy to wipe off. But after wiping for a while, a bubble fell out. Strength +1, it was a good start. It had been so long since he found a bubble. He continued to wipe, and some iron slag fell off. Some bubbles fell again. Spirit +1, Spirit Sword +1, Stamina +1, Jiang Hao was quite delighted. When he was almost done wiping the sword, blue bubbles fell. Cultivation +1, Lifeblood +1, a smile appeared on Jiang Hao's face. Then, he continued to wipe. It had been a long time since he got blue bubbles. July was already here, and it was already late in the month. He hadn't had a chance to get the bubbles. It was great to get a few. He slowly wiped the sword. It wasn't as shiny, but it was getting there. It looked like an ordinary spirit sword. But the bubbles kept appearing. Although there were fewer blue ones, it still popped up occasionally. That was enough. In a short while, the whole sword was clean. Now, it looked like an ordinary, sharp sword. Jiang Hao carefully sensed it and found that everything on the surface was fake. The sword embryo was on the inside. It needed enough sword's intent to awaken it. After wiping it again and confirming that there were no bubbles, he put the things away. No matter how you look at it, it's an ordinary magic treasure. It's not easy to sell. Even if someone was in the primordial spirit realm, they couldn't sense the unique power of the sword without the knowledge from the nameless manual. Such a genius was hard to come by. Even if encountered, the other party may not be able to offer a price. He found that he had gained 10 blue bubbles this time. That was a lot. They were equivalent to taking care of the heavenly fragrance Dao flower for 2 months. Jiang Hao wiped the other 5 magic treasures. It's not that wiping the magic treasure clean will be valuable. These magic treasures are all rusty, but each of them has some spirituality. They were not easy to sell. Only powerful people could sense their uniqueness. Maybe they could be sold for a good price. After wiping the 5 magic treasures, he gained 9 blue bubbles. He had spent about 100,000 on them and finally gained 19 blue bubbles, along with some green and white bubbles. It was already a good profit, especially since these things could still be sold. But he couldn't sell them with the cultivation of the Golden Core realm. He needed to use the primordial spirit realm to meet someone powerful. Otherwise, he would be stuck with them forever, especially the sword embryo. After packing up his things, Jiang Hao began to adjust his state. It wasn't long before it was midnight. The gathering was about to begin. At midnight, Jiang Hao entered the stone tablet. When he came in, the first thing he saw was Zhong, who was now covered in black energy. It seemed that she could fall into demonic cultivation at any moment. After that, she would no longer be herself. It was very dangerous. Unfortunately, he didn't understand it. Even if he wanted to help, he couldn't. The others were also watching Zhong. After everyone arrived, they greeted Senior Dan Yuan. He asked if they had any cultivation problems. Now, it seemed that everyone was settling down, and there were no cultivation problems. If anyone had any problem, it was Zhong. Sure enough, Senior Dan Yuan explained the immortal intent again. Xing seemed more focused than last time, and Liu seemed to understand more as well. Gui nodded to show her understanding. Only Jiang Hao, as always, remained bewildered as if it was something he was hearing for the first time. The gap in their realms was too vast. It made it impossible for him to comprehend immortal intent. He could only wait calmly. After a while, Zhong said, "Thanks, Senior Dan Yuan." After the explanation, Dan Yuan smiled. "Have you made a decision?" The figure shrouded in black energy nodded. "Yes, the result should be out soon." Her answer made Jiang Hao and the others curious about Zhong's intentions. However, she didn't speak again. She seemed to be struggling. It felt like a desperate situation. Dan Yuan didn't say much. "How is the sea-sky forest?" This question was directed at Gui as she was assigned the task. "It has erupted. The corpse sea is spreading now. There is a vortex in the west, and the corpses inside are one of the vortexes. We don't know the source. The Astronomical Academy can't stop it. Even if someone notices, they can't do anything," Gui said. She didn't go there herself, but she heard a lot about it. "A fortune vortex?" Dan Yuan smiled. "Did the noodle shop chef inform you?" Gui nodded. "It seems that someone extraordinary has appeared in the shop." Dan Yuan sighed with emotion. Gui hesitated. "It's Jiyu Jin." At that, Zhong, who had been silent all this while, suddenly turned and looked at Gui. "What? How is that possible?" "I don't know. I only know that they've been repeating the phrase convergence of the ancient and modern world a lot. It's said that the issue with the vortex depends on that person," said Gui. She didn't intend to reveal this, but a major crisis was approaching. It was necessary to inform them as much as possible. This way, she might have a better chance at survival. Jiang Hao lowered his head and did not speak. Gui might not know that the person she referred to as the one who could make or break this situation was just a small cultivator. There was no hope at all. Jiyu Jin? Liu was puzzled. Even Xing was puzzled. They had never heard of this person's existence. Jiyu Jin is not from this era. It's natural that you don't know him. His existence is irreplaceable for the West. In those years, he was like a beam of light who illuminated the entire West with his strength. Because of his existence, numerous powerful people rose in the West, and he suppressed the chaos, Dan Yuan said with a smile. But he has long disappeared. Many people have forgotten his existence. There has been no news of him even though the Astronomical Academy has searched far and wide. Xing frowned slightly. If such a person has returned, why haven't the major sects received any news? The overseas region doesn't seem to have much information about the West either, Liu said. Don't think too much. Jiyu Jin hasn't actually returned. Jiang Hao sighed inwardly. If everyone thought that Jiyu Jin had returned, he, who carried the identity of Jiyu Jin, would probably face tremendous pressure. No matter what, he couldn't be careless. Without enough strength, he wouldn't get involved in anything too dangerous. Dan Yuan didn't dwell much on the topic and instead asked about the whereabouts of the old man corpse sea. However, no one knew where the corpse sea old man had gone. They only knew that the sea-sky forest had been occupied by the corpse sea. At that point, Dan Yuan suddenly asked, "Who among you is in the West?" Zhong was the first to speak. "I am, but I can't move right now." Everyone understood Zhong's situation. It was uncertain whether she could survive this. "I am in the West too, but I can't move right now." She had to follow that person. Only then was it possible for her to survive this calamity. Her situation was similar to Zhong's in a way. She was going through a lot. But if Zhong succeeded, she could break through to the immortal ascension platform, while she would only be able to survive. There probably wasn't anyone else in the West. Chapter 852. The heavenly fate misfortune pearl was also brought to the West. Jiang Hao wondered if he should also tell them that he was in the West. He was caught off guard. He wanted to avoid revealing his location. The end of all things was after the Earth Extreme Silent Pair. If he did anything, it would be chaos. However, if these people knew he was in the West, he could avoid major issues. He didn't want to take on more tasks at the moment. There was likely some mission to fulfill if Senior Dan Yuan was asking them where they were. Is there anyone else in the West? Gui asked. I am here temporarily, Liu said suddenly. Gui was surprised. Friend Liu, are you also there because of the Sage's pages? Most people were in the West for the same reason. But Liu shook his head. Gui didn't ask further and turned to the others. So, is there anyone else? Jiang Hao remained silent for a moment. I'm here too, he said after a moment. Gui looked bewildered. Others were also somewhat surprised. Did you take the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl with you? Asked Xing. Jiang Hao shook his head. Gui breathed a sigh of relief. But the heavenly fate misfortune pearl is with me. Gui was speechless. For a moment, she didn't understand what he was trying to do, running around with such a dangerous object. Her intention for coming to the West was completely crushed. Liu was also surprised. He then looked at Xing. Didn't you go to the West? If everyone was in the West, the problems would be easier to handle. Gui looked forward to that. If there were more people present, she would feel safer. At least she wouldn't be alone. It was like when she encountered the immortal fate before, and she could only watch by herself. That feeling was unbearable. Xing smiled and shook his head. No, I am in the East. Jiang Hao felt that both Gui and Liu were disappointed by that. Being in the same region wasn't so difficult because it was hard to run into each other. The West was vast. Even if two people wanted to find each other, it would be a challenge. It would take a long time even if they were to meet at a designated location. What was frightening was that Jing and they were in the same place. Senior Dan Yuan had no more tasks, so it was time for everyone to trade information. Jiang Hao was in the West, mainly for the Sage's pages. There was nothing else to care about. They quietly finished their transaction. Are you going to the Genshin Cliff? Zhong asked. Gui shook her head. I can't. She could only follow that person for now. I might go, Jiang Hao said. Liu wasn't there for the pages, so he wasn't headed there. So, Jiang Hao had to speak up. There is a village named Big Mountain near Genshin Cliff. There is a grave on the hill behind the village. If you pass by, friend Jing, can you offer an incense on my behalf? Zhong said. Jiang Hao nodded. Okay. The reward in exchange wasn't mentioned. If Zhong failed, he wouldn't get the reward for the mission. If she succeeded, then he could receive the reward at any time. That was how the gathering worked. I want news on the Heavenly Spirit Tribe, said Xing. He looked at Liu. How detailed do you want it? Liu asked. The more detailed, the better, Xing said. Jiang Hao was surprised. It was understandable when Gui wanted information about the Heavenly Spirit Tribe before, but it was strange that Xing wanted it too. Liu nodded, and Xing asked what he needed to do in exchange. Liu thought about it. I want to know what information the Clear Sky School has about the Dragon Clan. Xing readily agreed. Gui seemed deep in thought, but she didn't say anything. She still needed to pay attention to her own condition. With no more transactions, everyone began to talk about the recent events. Both the End of All Things and the Great Thousand God sect want the astronomical scroll. The former might want it for the Sage's pages, and the latter. I don't know yet, said Zhong. Jiang Hao understood. It seemed that besides Zhong, people from the Great Thousand God sect were also after the scroll. The situation in the West has a significant impact. The Bright Moon sect has sent someone, but they may not intervene because that involves the fortune of the West. As Gui said, Perhaps only special individuals can resolve the situation. Otherwise, it will be a disaster for all living beings. That is probably what the end of all things wants to see, Xing said. But the information about that corpse still seems to be a mystery. I only know that he may be from the corpse clan. Speaking of corpses, there's something I need to inform you about, said Dan Yuan as he looked at Jiang Hao, Gui, and Liu. In the west, you need to be careful. If I'm not mistaken, the danger in the sea-sky forest hasn't escalated because that corpse hasn't made a move. It likely has already left the sea-sky forest and is wandering around the west. Be careful. It is most likely to approach those who possess karmic treasures and fortune treasures. Karmic treasures? They immediately thought of the stone tablet they used. This tablet was most likely such a treasure. As for the fortune treasures, they looked at Jing. At the same time, they thought of the heavenly fate misfortune pearl. Why are you looking at me? Can the heavenly fate misfortune pearl also be considered a fortune treasure? Jiang Hao felt worried. He recalled the feedback from the appraisal. The heavenly fate misfortune pearl seemed to be genuinely a fortune treasure. His heart sank. Even Gui and the others were worried. It was already dangerous enough as it was. The West would soon be in trouble. Do you have a way to avoid it, Senior? Jiang Hao asked. There is indeed a way, Dan Yuan said. If what Gui said is true, then you can try to find Jiyu Jin. He has a special fortune in the West. Perhaps it can confuse the opponent. Only by staying at Jiyu Jin's side can you avoid the corpse. However, both the corpse and Jiyu Jin are extraordinary individuals. They might clash with each other. Jiang Hao sighed in his heart. His situation was getting even more complicated than he had anticipated. No matter what he did, he couldn't avoid the corpse. It was truly a dead end. After thanking him, Jiang Hao fell silent. The matter was too shocking. The gathering also ended. At that time, everyone who woke up from the gathering felt down. In a loft, Mr. Dao woke up from his meditation. He held a book in his hand, and there was warm tea by his side. He sighed heavily. He put down the book and walked out of the loft. Tang Yue was outside on guard. Mr. Dao, another sleepless night? Indeed. Mr. Dao smiled helplessly. Then, he looked around and said, "Where's Jushin? Call him." Okay. Tang Yue nodded and then used a secret technique to summon Jushin. Mr. Dao, are you looking for me? Jushin flew over from afar. Mr. Dao nodded. He rubbed his temples. Pack up. Let's return overseas. Now. Tang Yue was puzzled. Yes. Now. Mr. Dao nodded. Chapter 853, A Cursed Retreat. Moonlight spilled onto the earth. Even the paths were illuminated. At that moment, a flying magical treasure whizzed through the high sky, with 3 figures above. One of them was sitting cross-legged and leisurely making tea. Mr. Dao, are we really going back like this? Tang Yue looked down and asked. Is there anything here worth missing? Mr. Dao asked curiously. Not really. It's just that we are so close to the dragon's nest. Why give up suddenly? Tang Yue felt regretful. Zhu Shun was also puzzled. He was about to find a very important person. Leaving like this suddenly made him feel remorseful. Mr. Tao's rapid departure indicated that this place was not safe to stay for long. They had to listen to him. Mr. Dao was good at strategizing. Mr. Dao did not miss anything. Everything was under his control. If Mr. Dao still chose to leave the West overnight, it meant it was a serious issue. However, they didn't understand. Are our enemies coming here? Tang Yue asked. No. Mr. Dao shook his head. The dragon's nest can be found anytime. It might be a bit delayed, but it wouldn't affect us so much. But if we don't leave right now, we might be stuck in the West for a long time. Zhu Shun and Tang Yue were surprised. Is the West dangerous? Tang Yue asked. Is there a danger we don't know about? Zhu Shun also asked. It wouldn't be this serious unless it was something very dangerous. Mr. Dao smiled. Tang Yue looked at Zhu Shun. Do you understand Mr. Tao's riddle? Zhu Shun was speechless. You don't like riddles now, do you? Baiju woke up in a wooden house in the village. She lived with the mountain princess. This house was the newest in the village, but it still looked ordinary and small. Baiju walked out of the house and walked to a big tree in the distance. She wanted to find someone to talk to. Auntie Qiao, she called out softly. Princess, are you looking for me? Qiao Yi walked out from behind the tree. Baiju was startled. Auntie Qiao, can you make some sound next time? What's wrong, princess? Qiao Yi was puzzled. Baiju asked softly, what is the name of this village? Mountain God Village, Qiao Yi said. That's good, Baiju breathed a sigh of relief. Auntie Qiao, after this is over, if we survive, let's go back to the south and stop wandering around for a while. Qiao Yi shook her head. Princess, have you forgotten? We still need to go overseas to find the heavenly spirit tribe. Baiju was speechless. She just wanted to go home. After the gathering, Jiang Hao took out a book and started taking notes. There wasn't much that needed to be written down. Only the great thousand god sect's involvement in Zhong's affairs needed to be noted, and there was also a high possibility that the corpses would be wandering in the west. They might be getting closer to fortune and karmic treasure. There was a possibility that Jiang Hao might run into the corpses. Ji Yujin's fortune and identity might confuse the corpses to seek him out. It was inevitable. Jiang Hao sighed. He felt that he was getting involved in too many things after coming to the West. It was difficult to escape. The only way now was to quickly find the sage's pages and return home. Before returning to his sect, he had to help Zhong with her offering. It was an ordinary task. He could now see how dangerous it was to make it to the Immortal Ascension platform. Even such an ordinary task was difficult to do. Zhong had underestimated the danger of advancement. Not everyone could make it to a new realm safely. After writing down everything, Jiang Hao began to study the Nameless Manual. What he needed now was the power of perception. He couldn't raise his combat prowess, so this was helpful. He needed to improve quickly. So, the only way was to use the spirit stones to digest the divine soul of the Holy Master. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it now. He didn't have enough spirit stones. He only had 12,000 left. The next day, Jiang Hao found Hong Yuye. He discussed what had happened in the gathering. He also mentioned the walking corpses in the west who were targeting fortune and karmic treasures. He hoped to get some advice from her because the solution given by Senior Dan Yuan was of no use to him. He was Ji Yujin. So, he obviously couldn't use his identity to solve his own problem. He also brewed a pot of tea for her. The Corpse Clan? Hong Yuye asked. Yes. It's said to be someone from the Corpse Clan, Jiang Hao said. Why do you think He's looking for karmic and fortune treasures? Hong Yuye poured a cup of tea for herself. If He's still a corpse, then karmic and fortune treasures are most likely needed to revive him. Hong Yuye took a sip of tea. Currently, even if the corpse is awake, it has no life force. It's similar to a discarded body. As time passes, it'll disappear. Then, it'll wait for someone to revive the corpse again. Jiang Hao nodded. He understood why it hadn't caused so much commotion. The corpses were trying to find a way to revive themselves. If it appears, can you sense it? Jiang Hao asked. People from the Corpse Clan have avatars. This person should be no exception. Hong Yuye looked at Jiang Hao meaningfully. Jiang Hao was somewhat puzzled. Many people had avatars. The Divine Corpse Sect, the Corpse Clan, and the Great Thousand God Sect. They all used clones and avatars. Hong Yuye didn't provide much information, and Jiang Hao could only take one step at a time. However, the danger seemed to exceed his capabilities. He didn't know what to do. In front of real power, he was too insignificant. No matter how hard he worked over the years, he still couldn't become strong enough. Perhaps in the sect, he could still manage. But once outside, he was reminded of where he stood. He felt helpless. Maybe he should continue hiding in the sect. The two headed toward the Thousand Springs River. At that moment, an old woman descended from the sky near the spring. There were already some people there. When they saw the old woman, they stepped back. The old woman had dark auras around her. When she landed, the grass withered at her feet. The curse spread. "I'm waiting for someone. I hope you won't get in my way," said the old woman as she looked around at the others. The people could only nod and retreat or stay there silently. Granny Kufa was a dangerous person. It wasn't good to provoke her. She could kill someone with a curse without even lifting her finger. Similar things had happened before. For a while, the crowd dared not speak, but they were all curious about who Granny Kufa was waiting for. After asking around, they found out that Granny Kufa's avatar had been killed while avenging her grandson. Now, the main body was waiting for the enemy here. Someone sighed. If this person doesn't have a big, influential background, they are in trouble. Yeah. They managed to offend her. "I heard that even the most powerful individuals of major sects don't want any beef with her," said a woman who was standing nearby. Chapter 854. The fearless Golden Core Realm Cultivator Jiang Hao headed toward the Thousand Springs River. After several days of walking, he finally saw the outline of the river. From a distance, he saw many mountains. A river flowed from the top to bottom. Many springs and tributaries converged into a river. This was the Thousand Springs River. Jiang Hao found that each spring was like nature's hot spring. "It's a pity that there's no in here," Jiang Hao said and sighed. Hong Yuye glanced at him. Jiang Hao didn't say much and looked ahead. He wanted to find clues about Sage's pages. However, no matter how he looked, he could find nothing. He didn't know if the clue he had found was accurate or not. The path to the springs was paved. Jiang Hao and Hong Yuye walked together and headed toward the highest point of the mountain. They wanted to take a look because they were hopeful that they could find something there. "Friend," said someone from close by. Jiang Hao turned and saw a young man sitting under a tree. He looked familiar. "Did you call me, Senior?" Jiang Hao asked. "Senior?" The young man smiled. "My status is not that high. I'm just slightly higher in the cultivation realm than you. I just wanted to say that, don't go up there. The path is full of curses. It's fine here, but it's hard to say if you'll be safe beyond this point." "Curses?" Jiang Hao looked and saw only faint traces of curses. "Yes." He nodded. "This path has been cursed by Granny Kufa. If you go up, you might suffer. I heard she is waiting for someone up there for revenge." "Granny Kufa?" Jiang Hao was surprised. He thought the curse had disappeared, and Granny Kufa might have given up. Unexpectedly, she was still waiting for him. She was actually quite knowledgeable. How had she found out that he was going to be here? Jiang Hao didn't know if she had just guessed it or found out by other means. "Yes. Do you know about Granny Kufa, friend?" He asked. For a Golden Core Realm cultivator like him, it was natural for him not to know about powerful people like that. Jiang Hao nodded. "I've heard about her a couple of times. What do you think of her, Senior?" "She is a person who possesses a special magic treasure but acts recklessly. It's said that some major sects tried to kill her, but she escaped every time and then began to retaliate. She targets talented disciples of major sects for revenge. She is difficult to guard against. There was a powerful expert who tried to chase her but wasn't able to kill her. She almost killed him. A senior had to intervene to resolve the matter, said he what kind of magic treasure is it that allows her to be so reckless?" Jiang Hao was curious. "It's something related to curses and survival," said he according to some seniors, it might be related to the longevity clan. Although he knew where the opponent was, he was sure. It was necessary to understand the opponent's weakness to deal with them in one go. Since Granny Kufa was seen as troublesome by everyone, it was best to deal with her in one blow. He was surprised. The others also felt astonished. Was this person deliberately provoking Granny Kufa? They had thought this newcomer was just ignorant and reckless, but now, they felt that perhaps he had some tricks up his sleeves. The curse intensified, but Granny Kufa didn't appear. She was probably observing him. Jiang Hao took out the golden wheel. In an instant, he felt the curse's power erupting like a wave, followed by a figure in the void. That was an effective concealment technique. It's you. You killed my grandson. Granny Kufa looked at him in hatred and anger. My grandson wouldn't even harm an ant, but you killed him. Jiang Hao looked at her calmly. First, he needed to appraise her. Chapter 855. He was here for the kill. Jiang Hao set up a tea table on the side. He then brewed a pot of September spring. Only then did he turn to Hong Yuye. Senior, care for some tea? She didn't respond but sat down and drank the tea. People around them kept their eyes on Jiang Hao and paid little to no attention to Hong Yuye. They found Jiang Hao's behavior strange. He was making tea at a moment like this. You still have the leisure for this? Granny Kufa sneered. At this time, curses continued to emerge around the Thousand Springs River as if the curses had been planted there since long ago. So ominous. Jiang Hao shook his head and sighed. Others play with curses but want to remain mysterious. Yet you want to show off how ominous you are. Jiang Hao's eyes sparkled. A powerful aura condensed in the air and then erupted with a loud boom. They had no idea where the terrifying force came from. Boom. At the highest point of Thousand Springs River, an invisible force roared and sent people flying. It was Granny Kufa who had blasted everyone away with her power. The crowd was shocked. In the next moment, Jiang Hao chased after Granny Kufa. People reacted and followed with flying swords. However, when they arrived, they found that the person had disappeared. In the woods on the other hill, the heavenly cauldron unfolded. He appraised her. Granny Kufa, in the early stage of the Immortal Ascension platform. Her body contains the core branch of the Longevity Cursed Tree, which has been refined into the Longevity Thousand Hearts Curse. Every 50 years, a small realm can be condensed into a Longevity Heart. Before death, it is possible to connect the Longevity Heart with a treasure or a cursed heart to awaken it. The Cultivation realm lowers by 1 realm if killed. Yin-Yang bracelet can be used to confine the surrounding curse and prevent the Longevity Heart from activating. It can be seized and destroyed, which will kill the enemy. She came after you because she couldn't vent her anger on anyone else. She is confident that the person with the golden wheel is the one who killed her grandson. Jiang Hao was somewhat surprised. The treasure turned out to be the Longevity Cursed Tree. It's no wonder her curses her so formidable, and she's hard to kill. However, he could use the Yin-Yang bracelet to confine the curse and the power of the artifact. The curse was in the Thousand Springs River. He had to go back. At first, he had intended to solve the problem and then return. But now, he decided to take her along with him. He could simply explain that he didn't want to cause a commotion and disturb Hong Yuye. For a moment, he didn't know how to explain. But he couldn't hesitate. He deactivated the heavenly cauldron and charged forward. The mountain sea seal struck. The opponent also reacted. With a burst of power, vitality was replaced with massive strength. Boom. Powerful forces collided. Jiang Hao was thrown back. Some people had just arrived. They saw Jiang Hao being pushed back all the way back to the Thousand Springs River. Granny Kufa also arrived. She looked down at Jiang Hao. You are indeed the one who killed my grandson. If I say I just found the treasure lying around, would you believe me, senior? Jiang Hao asked. I don't believe you. Everyone makes excuses when they realize their death is near. Granny Kufa sneered. It seemed she had already figured out how to torture her opponent to death. Excuses. Jiang Hao found that somewhat amusing. Do you think the person who killed your grandson did the wrong thing? Of course, he did. He killed my innocent grandson, said Granny Kufa. Innocent? Wasn't your grandson deserving of death? Jiang Hao asked. What nonsense are you talking about? Granny Kufa was angry. You killed my grandson, and you still dare to slander him like this. Ask the people around. Wasn't my grandson a good and sensible child? If he did something wrong, it must have been someone around him who led him astray. He was good. Even if he made a mistake, shouldn't he be forgiven? Why kill him so ruthlessly? He was just a child. I said I didn't kill your grandson, said Jiang Hao. But I know who did. Granny Kufa and the people around were shocked. Many people realized that they had underestimated this person. He was indeed a powerful figure. He wasn't surprised. He just wanted to know why the person in front of him had come here. "Do you really know who killed my grandson?" Granny Kufa asked. "Yes, and she's right here." Jiang Hao nodded. "Here?" Granny Kufa looked around. "Who? Who killed my grandson?" "It's you," said Jiang Hao calmly. "You indulged him, spoiled him, and never taught him right from wrong. You gave him whatever he wanted, and you took care of anyone who offended him. Your actions made him think that the whole world would yield to him. He thought that everyone should worship him. It's you. You killed your grandson. What nonsense are you talking about?" Granny Kufa stared at Jiang Hao like a madwoman. "You are trying to play mind games with me. You're trying to confuse me to save yourself." Jiang Hao smirked, and a blade appeared in his hands. He was ready, and the yin-yang bracelet covered the surroundings. He stepped out so fast that his movements were a blur. Granny Kufa was surprised. She finally sensed where her opponent was. Behind her. "Don't turn around." A blade pierced Granny Kufa in the chest. "I don't need to play mind games with you and confuse you to save myself." Granny Kufa sneered. "Do you think you can kill me? If I were so easy to kill, do you think I would be so reckless? Do you rely on the longevity 1,000 hearts curse to survive? Do you want to try using it to save yourself?" Jiang Hao smiled and swung his blade. She dodged the attack but not completely. Her arm was cut off. Jiang Hao laughed and swung the blade again. His every attack drew blood. Bit by bit, parts of Granny Kufa were hacked off. Granny Kufa, once so obnoxious, was suddenly afraid. "What is this? What have you done?" Granny Kufa was horrified to find that her curses couldn't touch the person in front of her at all. She couldn't even use the longevity 1,000 hearts curse through her treasure. Without the treasures, the power of the curse wouldn't spread out. All her winning cards had failed. How could this be? Jiang Hao leaped into the air and looked down at her. He slowly raised the blade in his hand. He used the second form of the heavenly blade, mountain suppression. "Don't struggle, and don't bother asking why this is happening. My arrival means your death. That's all." With the blessing of the mountain sea seal, the mountain suppression technique became formidable. Boom! With one stroke, the mighty force of the mountain and sea pressed down. Granny Kufa was horrified as the momentum overwhelmed her. Then, she fell unconscious to the ground. Her body shattered and scattered in the wind. The thunderous blow silenced everyone. The terrifying power made everyone tremble with fear. This was definitely not an ordinary senior. It was no wonder this person had walked so casually along the mountain path. He was here for the kill. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,